What it do, citizens of P-Town? You know what this is. I am back. I've remembered my YouTube login password, and I've returned from YouTuber hibernation to talk about none other than the 26th annual San Diego Asian Film Festival. What better way to make a comeback video than to talk about something that I'm passionate about, which is Asian cinema. As always, before we get into this list, I want to thank everybody who helped out at SDAFF, whether or not they work there, helped scan tickets, helped create schedules, helped secure the films that we saw in this festival, who helped with the screenings, did presentations. Thank you to everybody who helped out, who sponsored, etc. Thanks for creating another great festival for another great year. I can't wait for the next one, but until then, I'm going to be talking about my movies and my schedule, the movies that I watched. We're going to be going through the 11 movies that I saw at SDAFF in relative order from least preferred to absolute favorites. So let's kick this off, starting off with Renoir, which was written and directed by Chie Hawakaya. Renoir tells the story of a young girl who is going through a sprouting and growing emotional registration of death. In other words, ideally, most kids won't have to deal with death in their lives. And through this main character, Chie Hawakaya is trying to remedy that time in her life where she dealt with death at a young age, but she just couldn't recognize the urgency and that death is never convenient and time is very limited. From this girl's view, why should we worry about death? Death is something that happens at the end of one's life. It's like a corner of one's life. Why think about death when we can talk about life? Life is where we can have our great emotions like happiness, excitement, and fun. It's in life that we can have all of our good experiences, such as watching television, listening to the radio, riding our bikes, dancing with friends. This is what we can experience with life. And so why think about death? And so through this young character, the girl is learning that death can be very draining, that taking care of someone who is dying is very exhausting. The potential financial burden that comes up with death and someone in the family, the logistics of planning a funeral, watching somebody die is exhausting. And so I think Hawaii is trying to remedy that time where she just wishes that she had more time with someone. And not that she didn't have the time, but just couldn't register that time was limited. This movie does feel very personal, which does make it very easy to extract a lot of the themes from Renoir. There is a lot to get out of it. The second movie that I want to discuss is a South Korean film called Manic, directed by Lee Yoo-jin. Manic tells the story of a lesbian bar owner who moves to a rural town in South Korea, and in an effort to preserve inclusivity, openness, and acceptance, she decides to run for town mayor against none other than her homophobic ex-husband. Manic is a pretty mild drama comedy in which the laughs are decent and the drama is executed okay, but I do want to acknowledge that movies like Manic are very important for queer cinema. We have seen a lot of times in queer cinema and queer art in general, we watch queer characters go through the absolute depths of despair and endure the harshest tragedies. And not that they don't, they absolutely do. But we also need movies like Manic in which queer people can just watch it and have a smile on their face. We want to see queer people enjoy life because so many of them do. Once again, not to say that they don't endure hardship, which, like I said, they 100% do just by being themselves. I think a movie like Manic is important to have an enjoyable, fun little experience. The third movie that I would like to discuss is a Taiwanese horror romance film called Haunted Mountains: The Yellow Taboo. This was directed by Chia Ying-sai. Where we begin in Haunted Mountains is that a young man, while hiking the mountain with his girlfriend, discovers that his girlfriend, and other characters are stuck in a time loop in which at the end of each night, his girlfriend inevitably dies by some supernatural force and for some whatever strange reason. And as he navigates this time loop and experiences his girlfriend's death over and over and over again, he realizes that the supernatural force tying him and the characters in this time loop relate to a very tragic incident that happened on that same mountain many years ago. Haunted Mountains does have a lot of jank in its editing. It is pretty rough. I feel like this film was subjected to the producer editing knife, in which not only did this movie had to be cut down to less than 90 minutes, including credits, but also it had to weave in big twists and turns throughout the narrative, these big plot twists, these reveals, character revelations, all of that peppered throughout the narrative, and like I said, an already pretty tight runtime. With that said, I do like what The Yellow Taboo is trying to speak to in terms of its themes, particularly regret. Regret is a common theme in these type of time loop films. A lot of us have those events or those choices that we made that we regret. Whether or not they were consequential or inconsequential, there are so many things that we wish we could change, as far as going back and wish that we did something different, made a different choice, did something better. If I did this, this wouldn't have happened. We harbor that regret for a very long time. The Yellow Taboo is trying to remedy that within people and say, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. You can't change the past, but you can take your experiences and move forward and be a better person. The Yellow Taboo also landed its emotional core, particularly in the romance, in which it is the people around us that can help assure us that we can grow and change as people for the better. It's our support system that we can rely on for assurance to move on from those regretful experiences that we had. The fourth film out of 11 that I would like to discuss is a Japanese horror comedy film called Mag, directed by Yurian Retriever. This was one of the 2 Q&As that I attended during the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Here she is right here on the right in that top picture. Yurian Retriever is an amazing, wonderful person. She had apparently only been living in LA for a year, possibly learning English for just about a year, yet she made a strong effort to answer all of the questions in English as much as possible. Whenever somebody asked a question, she would go up to them. I'm talking like, even if they were in the middle row, she would navigate through the entire row, stand right in front of them, introduce herself, ask their names, remember their names. She was just very excited to be there and promote her movie, and she's just a wonderful person. On to Mag. Mag tells the story of the titular dangerous spirit that is Mag. It is an episodic movie in which different characters experience Mag all under the backdrop of romance. So a lot of the characters who are haunted by Mag have some sort of emotional, relational baggage to them by the time that they experience this vengeful spirit. On the horror side, this movie is kind of cliche and standard. It's very relentless in its attempt to kind of scare you. In that area where I thought this movie fell a little flat, where Mag shined was in its very bizarre moments. There is this young girl character who has a crush on someone, and she's that stalker type, you know what I mean? And so her apartment is just filled with these statues full of her crush's likeness in them. They're just plastered all around her apartment. And in particular, there's this scene with this interactive wall in which the wall has her crush's face on it painted, as well as an open interactive hole where the mouth is. Now, you can probably see where I'm going with this. I'm not worried about getting demonetized. This channel isn't monetized. There's a scene where she like douses herself in like oil or lube, and she's just like going in and out of the hole. It's just a really weird moment that I think I would place somewhere in the modern horror visual galleries. And I think it's in that absurdity where Mag does stand out in between the cliche horror. A lot of people did have different interpretations for character choices, for story moments, and they all presented it to Yurian. And through her still developing English, she attributed a lot of those emotions to accidents. What Yurian did was write a personal movie about her own relationship woes, and she just let the audience dictate their own emotions towards the story. She gave a funny anecdote in which when she wanted to direct a movie, she told the producers kind of like her relationships, her love life, and things like that, and they responded, "Oh, so this is a horror story." So take that what you will about her dating history. So I thought that the Q&A was a lot of fun, and overall pretty decent movie. The fifth film that I would like to discuss is another South Korean film called Project Y, directed by Lee Hwan. Project Y is a neat little crime drama that tells about 2 young, close-knit women who, after losing their money in a scheme, decide to enter themselves into the crime web on a quest for vengeance. And as these type of crime narratives go, the further that they get into this crime web, the higher the stakes get, and the more money is present, and the more dangerous that it becomes. The biggest highlight that I can take from Project Y is the performances. Our main characters come into this movie with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma to them. And this story that they're going through is unearthing a lot of those skeletons. And so I think they wear that emotion very well. Performances are great all around. And Project Y does have some subtext happening with hostess culture, that job in which conventionally attractive young women drink with usually older businessmen, people in power, that power dynamic, that power discrepancy that's occurring in these types of settings. There's definitely some subtext happening with Project Y. A pretty entertaining crime drama. The next film I would like to discuss is the first of 2 Chinese films that I saw, and that's none other than Begón's Resurrection. Resurrection is coming off of Cannes Film Festival. This is definitely one of the most memorable theatrical experiences I will ever have. It's hard to discuss the plot of Resurrection. All I can just talk about is the experience. Resurrection is a kaleidoscope cascading into dreams and film. We are presented 6 different chapters that all pertain to the different senses: touch, sight, smell, taste, all with dreamlike qualities and supernatural forces peppered throughout the entire movie. Resurrection is a maximalist art film on the highest level. On a technical aspect, Resurrection is perfect. Resurrection is full of amazing, deliberate camera work, cinematography, use of transitions, blocking, framing, lavish sets, deep production design, color composition, visual composition. Everything that you see within the frame, it is just absolutely immaculate. The type of movie that you would want to see in the biggest screen possible. Because of its very dreamlike and artistic approach to the narrative, the story does feel pretty opaque and pretty flimsy. Kind of like in a real dream, you wake up from it and you're not really sure what to make sense of everything, not sure how the story puts itself together, what to take away from it. But I do think Resurrection is trying to make a parallel between dreams and watching movies. Because technically, watching movies is almost like an act of dreaming. You are deliberately putting yourself in a hypnotic, trance-like state when watching a movie, taking in the senses and what you're seeing and perceiving on the screen. And it's up to you to decide how much you buy into the story and you buy into the experience. Begón truly sought out to create a film like Resurrection for the theatrical experience. There are multiple references to being a part of a movie experience, being in a theater witnessing this story in Resurrection. And I think that on a technical level, this is the type of movie you gotta see on the biggest screen possible. Resurrection, at the end of the day, is a love letter to film, filmmaking, and the film experience. By far, it will be a highlight of theater experiences probably for the rest of my life. And as we get into the 7th film that I watched in the festival, all the way up to the 11th, now we are getting into films that I don't think were just the highlights of the festival, but also potentially highlights of the year. And starting off, I got to watch Ki Nam In, directed and co-written by Leon Lee. This was my first and only Vietnamese film of the festival. This was the second Q&A screening that I attended. Narratively, the easiest comparison that I can make to describing Ki Nam In is a Vietnamese version of In the Mood for Love. Mentioning In the Mood for Love will already give you a strong idea of the structure and the emotion that Ki Nam In is trying to illustrate. This tells a young man who is translating for French literature who falls in love with a slightly older widow. Ki Nam In is a very quiet and intimate portrayal of Vietnamese community, gestures, and restrained longing. It's an incredible transportation to Vietnam and its culture and relational dynamics. So in my bottom right picture over here, I got to see this with my parents, my uncle, and most of my aunts, really, who are all Vietnamese immigrants. And so it was a really great experience. Here's a picture of me alongside the whole family, and then the co-screenwriter Gong Ngọc. And after talking with all my relatives about the film, they confirmed that this is a very accurate and authentic portrayal of Vietnam. They strongly emphasized the aspect of gossiping and just how much that builds and how much that spreads in Vietnamese culture, as well as the sense of community in which so many people help and support others with nothing to gain, really just because of the strong community there. You have characters going out of their ways to make huge portions of food for other people for an entire wedding, and then you have other people going out of their way to help make that food and help support the people making that decision in the first place. Ki Nam In is a film that's very weighted in personal gestures like these. Sometimes just a moment of close proximity, of shoes touching together is a huge payoff. Sometimes just the revelation or referencing of a specific book unearths that subtle, restrained desire that somebody had all along. This movie is so quiet and devastatingly beautiful. It balances restrained longing alongside a great portrayal of community to build a beautiful, empathy-growing experience for non-Vietnamese people towards Vietnamese people and their culture, the people, the country. This will definitely be up there as one of my favorite Vietnamese films and definitely one of my favorite theatrical experiences because of the people that I watched it with. The next of multiple movies that I'm going to flex that I saw at this festival was none other than my first Lav Diaz film, actually. His film to come out this year, Magellan, which tells the true story of Francisco Magellan and his expedition, his journey across the sea, and his first contact with the native Filipino people, which would, as history has it, result in his death. Apologies if I'm referencing my Letterboxd review verbatim, which you can check out right here. Diaz's stationary camera puts Magellan's whole journey right under the microscope, and this film is a slow, scathing critique of colonialism and its hypocrisy under the guise of religion. Because we watch, ploddingly, the grueling hardship that Magellan and his expedition goes through during this journey for years at a time at sea. We watch people die from sickness, malnutrition, and Magellan himself quickly issues death upon people at a moment's offense, the moment he hears or suspects mutiny, heresy, or even sees fatal sin like gay sex, which is against their religion. He is so quick to sentence people to death. It is lamentable how Magellan could go through this entire journey and go through all that hardship. And yet, when he touches down to the Philippines, he wants to colonize the people, to force them into certain ways. Lav Diaz, even though he humanizes Magellan, he does not shy away from calling him out for his true savagery. We see how Magellan was able to approach death so quickly and just with the flick of his hand. And yet, with the Filipino people, we see extended, slow scenes of their rituals in death. There's this whole set piece in which, after multiple young people died, there's this long ritual in which a person slays a pig in front of everybody, dances, and cries out for their souls to be taken. People are holding the corpses of the dead very closely, like an intimate moment. And then when they're released into the ocean, they're crying the entire time. They're bawling. They're truly grieving and honoring their deaths. And with that juxtaposition, the real savagery is in display. Lav Diaz is known for exploring Filipino culture for long periods of time within his films, and I think this was a really nice approach to the roots, some of the roots of Filipino culture. And of course, this movie looks fucking fantastic. It is shot magnificently, stationary camera. Every frame of painting is a great way to describe the cinematography in this movie. Phenomenal color composition, great blocking of characters, framing. In particular, anything involving the beach was just gorgeous. So yeah, a hell of a great way to start my first Lav Diaz experience with Magellan. Next up, we have a Chinese film that I watched, Clash, directed by Zhang Jiachen. If you can guess what type of story a underdog sports story would have, you've probably guessed the entire plot of Clash. We watch non-traditional athletes get together to learn a sport, learn how to play the sport, learn how to work with their team. The team grows closer together, they form a bond, they succeed, there's an emotional fallout, they break up, they reunite back in time for the championship and win the championship. You've probably already guessed it before, but Clash is honestly my favorite example of these type of movies. I think the way that it is rooted for Asian audiences does resonate with me a bit more. I think that Clash does have a very effective way of getting you to care about all these characters with their very natural charm and charisma. Every time the trailer for SDAFF played before each movie, every time Clash came up, I just felt pretty warm inside, which does illustrate how Clash was successfully able to get you to care about these characters and their story, which is a true story, by the way. Great humor, abrupt tonal shifts, even a surprise musical number in between, breaking the fourth wall. Clash is, as of right now, my favorite sports underdog story. The 10th movie that I saw at the festival is none other than one of my biggest flexes, Each year, SDAFF has a martial arts movie showcase called Mystery Kung Fu Theater. You buy tickets, you show up, you know they're going to play a martial arts movie, you don't know what it is until you get there. And I was extremely pleasantly surprised when I found out that I would be rewatching 36 Chambers of Shaolin in a theater. Now, I could talk about the quality of this movie, but it doesn't need to be said. This is on the Mount Rushmore of most iconic, greatest, and most influential martial arts movies of all time. Even if it isn't one of my personal favorite, I do believe it does deserve to go on that Mount Rushmore. As it always comes to with Mystery Kung Fu Theater, I'm always so thankful each time I get to watch a martial arts movie in a theater, whether or not it is a first-time watch or a rewatch such as this. In certain ways, martial arts films are my roots, in which so much of the trajectory for what I'm into nowadays is because of martial arts movies. I got into movies because of this genre. And so every time I get to experience one in a theater and see its gorgeous visual composition, its very fun blocking and framing, its crash zoom, its robust and repetitive sound design, each and every time I'm always going to come away with a memorable theatrical experience. Oh, and on top of that, the movie was amazing, obviously. The crowd was very receptive to this movie. They clapped whenever they name-dropped the Shaolin Temple. They cheered every time Gordon the You's character overcame a chamber. Just so well progressed and just a lot of fun and just great to watch with the crowd. Once again, shout out to SDAFF. Super thankful that I got to see this. And as the sun has set in my area, so will the sunset on this list video. Let's just jump right into it. My favorite film from the San Diego Asian Film Festival. I'm just going to flex on y'all that I went to a sold-out screening of No Other Choice, directed and co-written by Park Chan-wook. Man, this was an amazing high of the festival, obviously. As far as a movie goes, it is my favorite. And just an overall theatrical experience, it was nothing but a highlight. Just going to this packed theater and seeing arguably the hottest ticket in town at that point. And so in case you're behind on the festival circuit and all the films making the biggest buzzes, No Other Choice is about a middle-aged man after working for his paper company for over 2 decades is suddenly laid off. He is desperate to take care of his family, and that desperation leads him to eliminating the competition that may threaten his job security. I'm going to talk about all the specifics of this film in another video. I'm going to review No Other Choice individually, but for right now, I'm just going to gush about how amazing this movie is, how it is a tour de force of the theater experience. It combines high-level filmmaking, it's rich in satire and themes, and it's also just wildly entertaining. The cinematography is great, the framing and the blocking is perfect, the performances from the entire cast, whether or not it is Lee Byung-hun or really just the entire cast, are just giving it everything they've got in this film. Conceptually, there's a lot to pull from this film, especially with the relatable hardship that is the job market of today. In the title, No Other Choice, we're presented with a lot of different characters who have their own respective dilemmas relating to the same thing. One example that I thought stood out was the idea of loyalty. Every character, in some shape or form, wants to either maintain their stability or to grasp it for the first time. And so that goal affects their character choices. For some characters, loyalty is what they lean on to. Even if it means batting an eye against what is happening, loyalty and remaining true to somebody is what can ultimately save someone. And on the other side, you have people who cut other people off at a moment's notice in order to save their own hide. And so you have characters remaining loyal, being disloyal to the ones around them. And we see the consequences of those actions. And something that Park Chan-wook does with a lot of his films is that he's able to take the normal person, the normal character, put them through hardship, and then in some shape or form make us understand why that they were driven to make the choices that they do, or lack it thereof in the case of this movie. And so the optimism of No Other Choice is that Park Chan-wook is not encouraging people to commit these crimes even if we're all desperate, even if times are very tough as they are. But if people can maintain the humanity in them, if people can have a grasp on their soul, then so be it. The people who truly do have good in them despite doing bad things can still prosper. And I think Park Chan-wook is exploring that optimistic outcome. And it's that very gray exploration of every single character that makes this narrative so fascinating to witness. And then last but not least, it is a wickedly entertaining film. I wouldn't go as far as to call this a pure comedy just to not mess up anyone's expectations going to No Other Choice, but this film is extremely hilarious at times. I've kind of noticed that, the severity of the crime being committed, the funnier that some scenes are. A lot of times it kind of gives you that awkward kind of ah ha 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 moment, and yet Park Chan-wook is inviting you to laugh because there are some really outrageous moments in this film. It is a biting satire in which you can laugh at all these precarious and wild situations that these characters bring themselves into. And if, of course, when you peel it all back, it is all commentary about the job market. This is the world that we live in that could drive people to these great lengths. And so what you have with No Other Choice is a tour de force of filmmaking. Excellently crafted, thematically rich, and you're still happily stuffing your mouth with popcorn. Specifics I will talk about in my review video, but until then, this was without a doubt my favorite film of the San Diego Asian Film Festival, one of the most well-rounded movies I've seen this year, and you will be hearing about this film multiple times from me. And there you have it. That is my experience at the San Diego Asian Film Festival, the 26th year. Let me know what movies you've seen this year as we kind of start to wrap up 2025. End of the year lists are coming. So go ahead and let me know your favorite films so far of the year down below. Thank you all for watching this odyssey of a film. Looking forward to talk about more films later. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all later.